The rulebook doesn't say you have to tackle this journey of life alone. These are the times I make those connections with others, so we can all take a look back while we all move forward. This is the Dependent Independent Podcast. Minisode. Hey there, subscribers. Thank you for downloading and listening to Minisode 55 and a half of the Dependent Independent Podcast. I'm your host, Nick G. This is a podcast about making connections, looking back while moving forward. In these minisodes, I get my subscribers caught up on what they missed if they haven't listened to our last episode, which was episode 55, what's been going on with me since we posted our last episode, and what you can anticipate in future episodes. You can download the show on any podcast app on iOS or Android. You can stream this show off our website at thedependentindependent.com. You can check out our posts on our Facebook page at the Dependent Independent Podcast page. These minisodes we record and post on YouTube, so you can watch these on our website, but also stream these from our YouTube channel at the Dependent Independent Podcast page. We post our shows on Monday at midnight, whether it be these minisodes or our full episodes, where we're joined by a co-host, or I'm joined by a co-host, because this is all about making connections, and I like having new people that I've just gotten to know on the show to share those conversations and experiences through my listeners. If you haven't already done so and you're new, and this is the first time you're hearing about us, I suggest you subscribe. Subscribe to the show. You subscribe, and then your podcast feed will get it every time we post the show at midnight on Mondays. So, in regards to segues, I know these mini-sodes, we try to keep them short because our full episodes are pretty big. Our last episode, episode 55, I was joined by one of our biggest fans, the godfather of the TDI podcast. His name is Larry Herrera. Larry Herrera, a.k.a. Schmo the Intern, is on a podcast called The Idiots Podcast. Now, we received a lot of great positive responses from our episode, a shitload of downloads, which was awesome. And some of you asked if Larry had more time to tell his story. Now, the funny thing is, you can listen to The Idiots Podcast. They're on Wildfire Radio. They go live online at about 6:30 on Mondays. Every Monday, and they also post their shows on iTunes and Stitcher and everywhere where you can find this episode on the interwebs. So feel free to listen to their show, because Larry gets into way more detail about his story and everything he talked about, from pro wrestling to tackling the drug cartels to everything we talked about on the last episode. One thing I wanted to bring up is on our website, the dependentindependent.com website, which you can find the hyperlink in the show notes. You can check out you can stream our show. You can send me a message, which is cool. I know I don't ask you guys to email me anymore because no one ever used that long email address, but you can contact us, leave your email, and once we have our next live event, we can send you invites and get you guys here, which is really great. And you can check out my blog. Now, my latest blog post was really about, and I usually reflect on the blog posts of the previous mini-sode or episode. And during that show, I don't know if you heard that, because I know we didn't record it, but you would have seen it on my face. I talked about gifts in the blog post with Larry, and there was a time in the show where Larry gave me a gift, which is a dog tag, right? He gave me this dog tag, and this dog tag is of his late father, Anthony Herrera, and it has his Army ID number, his blood type, and his religion. And at first, I'm big in the military, and it's interesting. When he first gave it to me, I didn't quite understand the gravity of it, right? And I must have used that word like 6 times when I was describing the situation to Dewey. And he handed me this gift, and knowing that he's a devout fan of the show, he remembers everything we talk about, and he's taken this journey with me to this 200-episode podcast. He has paid attention to some of the things I've said about my dad, this disconnect I've had growing up with my dad, and I've dealt with it, and I've mentioned it. It's kind of shaped who I am. But the funny thing is about when Larry handed this to me, I didn't quite understand the gravity of it. He's handing me this thing. I thought, why do I deserve this? This is his father's dog tag. And if you listen to the show, there's this kind of metamorphosis of appreciation that happens throughout the episode. And it's not until I realized when we finished the show where it was coming from. You had a guy who's a fan of the show, cares about the show, godfather of the show, and he went and did something, one of the most kindest things that anyone's ever done for me, by simply taking a symbol of what was his father and giving it to me. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it and reflect on it in the last episode is it's what my audience didn't get to see. The look on my face, I could feel it changing, but not until the end of the show did I truly appreciate that. So Larry, I'm sure you're listening. I really appreciate this. This will become it's going to become a fixture on the show. So the 200 episode podcast sign behind me, I'm going to hang this on there. This will be officially part of the memorabilia, I guess, of the show, and become a symbol of what we're trying to do here. And Larry basically made the ultimate connection by sharing part of himself with me in the show. And Larry, I truly appreciate that. I don't know if you noticed when you watched it or watched me while we were recording how I changed, but not until I realized that your intent was to do that. I truly appreciated it. I hope I reflected that in the blog. So that was episode 55. We have a huge back catalog too. So, if you guys need a refresher, want to get to know what the hell I'm talking about, go back and listen to past episodes. I really worked my ass off to make sure those descriptions are succinct. So check them out. And then I mentioned it on the last show. I was actually on this, he was our last Are You Listening segment. Nisar Ahmed does a Career Metis podcast. That's Career Metis. He has a blog as well at careermetis.com. But he interviewed me, and soon as that posts, I'm going to put that out on my probably my LinkedIn because it's more professional. But he deals with career-oriented people, and I've started to talk a little bit more about my job, and that's where you'll be able to hear a little bit more about me on the professional side, what I do, my secret life that you guys don't really hear about. But that was amazing. I really enjoyed that. When you get a chance, make sure you check them out. I'm building the Are You Listening? I Think You Should page on my website where we're going to provide links and photos or hyperlinks and images of all of our Are You Listening segment winners, basically. Anyone who was an Are You Listening podcast profiled on the show. And I want to make sure that as I've experienced those podcasts, you guys listen to podcasts, you guys can go out on our website and you can check it out. Right now, the page is hidden because I'm still working on it. Corey Stewart of the Unpopular Culture podcast did my graphic design. So if you guys go on I don't know if it's the Facebook page at the Dependent Independent podcast page on Facebook, I think I have our logo, and it's awesome. I'm trying to find a really clean, neat way of designing it on the website. It's my first experience, or I'm still getting my feet wet with WordPress. We're designing a website that is compelling, but also easy and simple to use. Kind of like me. So, all right, what's happened since my last episode posted? I wanted to talk about my last weekend. When I was a kid, I know I've talked about my family. My family's kind of small. I mean, not a lot of my family members are alive or that I talk to. But family, the essence of blood, wasn't really something that I grew up appreciating. It wasn't really something that some people are really I would never say I was family oriented. I mean, now I have a beautiful family and I'm creating my own traditions, but I didn't come from that at all. I came from a lot of dysfunction and weirdness. And this past weekend, we spent some time with relatives that are actually on my side of the family. When I got married, there was one table at the wedding that had my only blood relatives, and even half the table wasn't blood. I believe at that table was my grandmother, my late grandmother, her friend, Carol, another two people, and I've mentioned them on the show, and the late Ernie Temple, who passed away over a year ago. I spoke about him on the show. He was basically my surrogate father, and his wife, Georgia, who are my best friend Sean's parents, and my Aunt Prudy, who I don't even think even by blood she was related. She was related to somebody who was married to somebody, and she brought her granddaughter, and some friends from the resort I visited when I was a kid, Doris and Gino. He sang at my wedding. Now, and lastly, my cousin Eileen, who was my mother's cousin, and her son John. So technically, and then my sister, but she was at another table. Technically, at my family, I mean, I had my entire family that attended, blood family that attended my wedding could fit in the room behind me. The weird thing is all the stories I tell my wife are really my renditions of the story. There's no one like holidays, Christmas, Easters. We don't hang out with anyone that has, unless my sister visits, similar stories, where you reminisce about experiences and all that stuff. So this past weekend, I was able to, we were able to make some time and spend some time with cousin John and Eileen, who attended my wedding. And the greatest thing about hanging out with family is that all these stories that I told my wife, I then can converse with somebody and add context to it, right? All these little nuances of things about my grandmother, because my cousin Eileen's aunt was my grandmother. My Aunt Frances was her mother, and Lucille was my grandmother. And it's weird. It's a weird type of vibe. It's almost uncomfortable when it starts because it's something I don't usually do. I'm used to just telling my own stories, but then it takes me some time to feel comfortable. But I'm noticing every time we don't hang out with them enough, because every time we hang out with them, it's always about past experiences, right? We relive experiences that, whether it be family reunions that we went to when I was younger with my grandmother, or vacations, or when my grandmother was a child, and how Eileen's mom, Frances, was a child and they lived together. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is, this whole podcast is about making connections, looking back while moving forward. I'm spending a lot of time with my family, John and Eileen, looking back, but I think I need to make a conscious decision to move forward. So I need to make a conscious effort. And Eileen, John, if you're listening, I told you I'd mention you guys on the show. I think it's important that I need to make a better effort to make sure we're spending more time together, because I'd rather make new memories that we can reflect on rather than constantly reliving the old memories. And life's too short to constantly look back all the time. I'd like to move forward. So as much as I sent those Facebook messages to you and the emails to you, when I say that we need to get together soon, I mean soon. I mean, we need to get something on the calendar, because I don't have a lot of family left, and you guys are unbelievably awesome and a great positive impact on my life, positive influence on my life, being part of my family and being part of that great side of the family, and I need to appreciate that more. So I'm going to make a more conscious effort, a better conscious effort. Is that right? Better, more? Yeah, more better conscious effort to get together with you guys. And I appreciate Jack's invite to Easter, which was great. But we're going to be spending it here at a winery, I think. Megan and I are going to go to a winery and for the day. And that's my commitment. So if I can pass off a lesson to those listening on the podcast and watching on YouTube, that it's great to think back with old friends about how things used to be, but I challenge you to make new memories, because it's really way more fun to make and relive the new ones rather than constantly rehashing the old ones. So that's what I did this past weekend. New job's great, by the way, if you're asking. New job's great. It's awesome. I'm having a great time. I'm being me. I mentioned that on the past mini-sode about why I was unhappy, and I want to make sure that I'm bringing that excitement to the podcast. So future podcasts. We've got a busy week. I mentioned her on the show before. She's been a guest on the 50th and the 2 Years to the Day event at the Tomfoolery Brewery, by the way, who I'm drinking their Crack Concrete. Awesome beer. I told you, Gail and Sean, I'd mention it on the show. It's the greatest beer ever. Stuff makes you fly. I mean, makes you fly. Jess is hosting my wife and I, Megan, at Drinks with Jess, so we'll be on her next show, and we're coordinating that. That's such a busy beaver in regards to podcasts. It's crazy how that just kind of snowballs into being busy when you're a podcaster. So we're going to be on, not only am I going to be on the Career Medicine podcast, which is more my professional side, I get to hang out with my wife and Jess, Drinks with Jess. We'll record this week. Now, my next episode 56, it's been a while since I just had my wife on the show, Meg. She's been a big part of the 50th and been on a few of our past episodes, our, I think, 92 episodes or shows that we have. They're not all episodes, but shows that we have, so you can check out our back catalog and get a little backstory. You can look back while we move forward, which is pretty neat now that I have that library. But my wife and I are going to have a little bit of a date night. She spent some time in Napa with her sister a few weeks ago, and she brought back some nice wine. So I think we're going to crack open a bottle of that expensive, fancy schmancy wine. And just like two parents who kids are running them ragged between sports and dance, and we both have jobs, that we're going to take some time and share our conversation with you. So we're going to get caught up on whether it be news, art, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. This is my show. I'm going to put it out there. And we just have to pick the time during this weekend, which is Easter weekend, and make sure that we have the time. So I got you caught up on what you missed in our last episode. Larry, it's now a fixture. Pardon me. I got something in my eye. Those YouTubers at home can see that. The dog tags, Larry. Awesome. Thank you. I can't express enough the appreciation I have for that. I will continue to make a conscious effort, more of an effort, which I have to be better at that, of making sure I'm creating new connections with my family, and I get to spend some time with Eileen. They live by the Jersey Shore, man. It's awesome. I mean, I live at 30 minutes from here, but they're right on top of it, which is awesome. And my cousin John, an amazing cook. We enjoyed our meal yesterday. And then on future episodes, you can check out episode 56, which is going to be a great date night with Megan, and that'll post next Monday at midnight. And then I mentioned her earlier, the graphic designer that helped me out, Corey Stewart and Michael Drain, a licensed therapist, who's going to be on my show. I'm going to have them and host them on episode 57, and I'm really looking forward to that. I have no idea what the topic's going to be, but I think it's going to be rad and awesome and cool, and it's going to be deep, real deep. They can tap into the weirdness that is me, and maybe I'll open up and get on the couch and cry a little bit. This has been Minisode 55.5 of the TDI podcast. You can check out all our links to wherever you can find the podcast in our show notes. You can find this video on YouTube at the Dependent Independent podcast page. You can follow me on Twitter at Dependent_Nick, Instagram Dependent_Nick, and you can follow the Facebook page of the TDI podcast at the Dependent Independent podcast page. Although the dependentindependent.com website will give you everything and all that's TDI podcast. Stream the show, watch our videos, check out my blog. I usually follow up every episode where I reflect on the episode. Even though I don't watch them or listen to them, that's where I reflect on the memories I get when I connect with people on this show on the way to 200 episodes. This is Nick G, your host, Minisode 55.5, and I am out.